On a forest road, a car carrying a family tries to escape from police pursuit. At a turn, the father loses control and the car veers off the road. The man tells his wife and daughter to run while he stays behind to try to throw the pursuers off their trail. The woman flees, clutching her child to her chest, and hides behind a tree when she hears gunshots. Soon they are found. The child is taken away, and the unconscious woman is also carried off in a car. Later, this woman is placed in the home of the high-ranking Commander Fred Waterford as a maid. Her real name, June, is now forbidden, so she is called Offred, emphasizing her belonging to her master. Serena, the official's wife, inquires about June's former master when her husband arrives. He greets the woman with the society's accepted phrase, "Blessed be the fruit," but Serena notices his interested glance. It becomes clear she is displeased by the presence of a young and beautiful woman in her home. Later, June meets the housemaid and cook, Rita, who is valued for her ability to bake homemade bread, a prized skill in Gilead, as the state advocates preserving traditional values. That day, Rita sends June to get groceries, and at the gate, she meets another maid, Offred, who belongs to Fred's neighbor. Their path is blocked by the commander's chauffeur, Nick, who is working on the yard. His status is so low that he is not even allowed a woman. He is friendly towards June, but she remains very reserved and passes by. Meeting up, the women head to the market. It's a rule that maids always walk in pairs for safety. In reality, however, they are required to spy on each other, reporting everything to their mistresses. On their way, the women see girls from an orphanage, and June, looking at them, remembers her daughter, but Offred reminds her of the time. Later, after buying groceries, the pair return home along the river, where they see the executed hanging on the walls. Looking at them, June remembers being brought to a re-education point called Red Center in Gilead. The main overseer, Aunt Lydia, was telling the other women how scientists in the past had corrupted the world with their dangerous discoveries to the extent that women stopped becoming pregnant and giving birth. Suddenly, June sees her best friend Moira among the maids. Moira signals and June walks by. Lydia continues her lecture. Women in the past were literally all fallen, but those gathered here are special because they can conceive and give birth, and this is a gift from God. They will be entrusted with bearing children for the highest-ranking members of Gilead society. One of the newcomers, Janine, makes a mocking comment about what she hears, for which she immediately receives a shock with an electric shocker, and then she is led away somewhere. June and Moira only get a chance to talk at night. Her friend asks June to endure. This madness will eventually end, and they will definitely find June's daughter and leave. At that time, Janine is brought into the bedroom. Now she is broken and cries, having had an eye removed. After all, for her main purpose, reproduction, it is not necessary. Now looking at the hanged, June is glad that Moira is not among them. Returning home, June starts preparing for the ceremony. She needs to be washed and well-groomed. So the woman takes a bath, again remembering her daughter. In the evening, the hour of the ceremony arrives, and June heads to the room of the commander and his wife. On her way, she remembers the Red Center again. Janine, the one-eyed girl by Lydia's order, tells the others about her subjection to violence, but society condemned her specifically. Now the maids also confirm that she is to blame herself, pointing at her. June hesitates and immediately receives a slap on the cheek from the overseer. She has no choice but to join the chorus of accusers. June snaps back to reality. Serena is nervous. Her husband is late. But then there is a knock on the door, and Fred appears. The ceremony begins. June lies on the bed, her head on Serena's lap, and Serena takes her hands. Fred, reciting prayers, proceeds, hoping the maid can conceive. When it's over, Fred leaves, and Serena sends June away. June can't sleep at night. She goes out into the yard, which is strictly forbidden, and Nick sees her. Again, she remembers the Red Center and Moira, who once, calming Janine, told her that non-compliance could lead a woman to be sent to the colonies to clean up toxic waste, leading to a slow and dreadful death. In the morning, June sees Nick again. He hasn't exposed her, but why? Later, they meet in the kitchen but can't talk, only exchanging glances. That day, all the maids gather for a ceremony where a pregnant Janine tells June about Moira's escape, so her friend is most likely already dead. This news shakes June, and she struggles to listen to Lydia's speech, who orders a man accused of violence against a maid, resulting in the death of an unborn child, to be brought forward. The maids form a circle, and on Lydia's command, they beat the accused to death. On her way home, June remembers telling Moira about her pregnancy, and her friend promised to always be by her side. Offred, who heard Janine's words, expresses her sympathy and suddenly remembers that there used to be an ice cream cafe here. The women realize they've been good at pretending, not revealing their feelings and suspecting each other. Offred shares that her little boy managed to escape to Canada with her friend, but she was caught. Then June confesses that her husband was also killed during their escape. As they part, Offred suddenly warns June that there is a spy living in her house and urges caution. In the morning, June, as usual, goes shopping. She tells Offred that she once worked as an editor at a major fashion magazine, and Offred confesses she was a professor of cytology. Although all scientists were sent to camps, it was decided to keep her for reproduction. On their way, the women pass by a destroyed church. After coming to power, the government of Gilead blew it up, along with the other temples. Suddenly, a black car drives up. Men get out and grab a passerby. Watching this, Offred confesses that she belongs to an underground resistance network and offers to join them. June would have to keep an eye on her master and tell her about his dealings, but the woman hesitates because she fears betrayal. Not so long ago, the U.S. troops lost a major battle, and now much of it belongs to the new state, Gilead, whose flag bears only 2 stars left. At home, June is met by Nick, who suddenly warns her to be wary of Offred. Then he conveys the commander's request for her to come to his office in the evening. June is confused because they are prohibited from meeting with the owners alone. She exists only for one purpose: conception and childbirth. If Serena finds out, it would not bode well for her. But then a car arrives to take her away to the home of Janine's master because it is time for Janine's child to be born. The chance of giving birth to a healthy child now is 1 in 5, if she can conceive at all. Each such event turns into a major celebration. Upon entering the house, the maids see the commander's wives gathered around the house owner's wife, mimicking her labor, while Janine lies in another room, where the maids go. Lydia is also there directing the process. June, watching Janine, remembers the birth of her own daughter in the empty maternity ward because out of all the birthing women, only she delivered a healthy child. Serena distracts her from her memories. The fact is, none of the commander's wives actually know how childbirth truly happens, and June is forced to answer their naive questions. For this, she receives a reward, a cookie, which she finds repulsive. However, June can't show her disgust and smiles gratefully. Meanwhile, Janine's labor approaches its conclusion. The wife of her commander is brought in and sits in the birthing chair behind Janine. Finally, the child is born, but it is given not to its mother, but to the commander's wife. The maids try to comfort their friend while the adoptive mother decides on a name for the girl. June remembers how after her childbirth, a woman who had lost her child stole Hannah and how she felt then. If not for her husband's intervention, she might have lost her daughter too. Later, Offred, learning about the invitation from her master, advises June to go to the commander, but to be very careful. In the evening, June heads to the master's office. Fred greets her warmly, invites her to sit, and unexpectedly suggests they play Scrabble. During the game, he suddenly mentions that he will be away for a week in Washington. June decides she must tell Offred about this, but the next morning, instead of her friend, another girl comes and tells her that she is now Offred, and she does not know what happened to the previous one. This greatly frightens June, and she becomes withdrawn. Offred, bound and gagged, is led down a long white corridor and locked in one of the rooms. June is distressed that she never learned her name. She finally starts to recover from the nightmare she has endured. She remembers that when it all began, people did not stand up to defend Congress and did not resist the government, which abolished the Constitution under the guise of combating terrorism. One day, all women's bank accounts were frozen. June and Moira learn about this in a cafe, where instead of coffee, they receive an insult from a male bartender. Later at work, trying to contact the bank, June suddenly sees armed men enter the office. The chief editor announces the dismissal of all women because, under the new law, they cannot work or manage money. The shocked women gather their belongings and leave the office. Outside, they are met by armed men who behave very rudely, indiscriminately accusing everyone of promiscuity. In the present, June returns home where Rita greets her, offering extraordinary desserts. June is confused, but Rita explains that the mistress noticed her delay. Thus, they are very hopeful that they will soon have a child. Serena appears and invites June to join her for a walk. The women visit Janine's baby. Unexpectedly for everyone, Serena lets June hold the child. Then the adoptive mother of the girl reports that Janine bit her when she came to pick up the girl after feeding. She can't wait to get rid of this ungrateful wretch from the house. June goes to her friend and asks her to behave more calmly, otherwise they will simply take the girl away. But Janine behaves irrationally because she believes the master loves her and will leave his wife for her. June realizes the woman's mental health is compromised. Later, Serena suddenly admits that everything they are doing is terrible. June rides home with Nick, who advises her to forget about Offred and not to be reckless. As they approach the house, June suddenly sees a black van. Nick tells her that she must tell everything and apologizes for not being able to protect her. June again recalls the beginning of the terror when she and Moira learned that under the new law, women could no longer own property. Thus, the money from their accounts was transferred to their husbands' accounts, who are now obligated to care for them. Women found themselves trapped as they had no money to leave the country. The government claims these are temporary measures as part of the fight against terrorism. It was then that June first became afraid, and now she is trembling with fear again. Nevertheless, she manages to tell nothing about the resistance group. In the end, the entire conversation revolves around Offred being a gender traitor, because in her past life she preferred women. June is punished for not reporting this to her mistress, but Serena stops the execution, announcing that June is pregnant and expels the investigators from the house. Meanwhile, Offred is brought to trial, accused of a romantic involvement with a household maid, and sentenced to redemption. Her friend is hanged before her eyes. At this time, Nick comes to June's room to check on her well-being. It seems he has feelings for her, but feelings for maids are forbidden, and June does not dare to reciprocate. After he leaves, June learns that there is no pregnancy. She mentally goes back to when people tried to protest and organize demonstrations that ended in the shooting of demonstrators. She and Moira also got caught in such an action and barely escaped, hiding in a cafe. In the morning, Serena shows her the future nursery, and June confesses that there will be no child. The mistress flies into a rage, beats her, and locks her in a room. Offred wakes up after surgery that removes all female desires. Meanwhile, June constantly thinks about her little daughter and her husband. She has been locked up for 12 days. Out of boredom, she explores the room and finds on the pantry wall a name scratched by Fred's previous maid. Soon, the commander returns from his trip. He tells his wife that one of the mentors from the Red Center escaped and told journalists about everything that happens there. Now he needs to contain the scandal. That day, Rita brings food to June and finds her on the floor. June claims she's feeling unwell, and Serena forces her to see a doctor. On her way, she remembers how women were prepared for the ceremony in the Red Center. Lydia explains that once a month, they must lie between the legs of the commander's wives, becoming one with them. Lydia reads from the sacred scripture where a wife asks her husband to give her children through a maid. So everything is done according to God's laws. In the present, she is taken to the clinic, and the doctor, after examining her, accidentally reveals that Fred cannot have children. He offers June help in conceiving, but the woman refuses, knowing it's very dangerous. She goes home in complete despair because a man, by law, cannot be sterile. Therefore, she will be blamed and sent to the mines. In the evening, she apologizes to Serena and asks for permission to take walks, as staying locked up is affecting her health negatively. But Serena is relentless and locks her up again. June again recalls the center. Back then, she and Moira captured a supervisor, stole her clothes, and escaped the center. They walked through the city for a long time, trying to figure out where they were, as they had been brought there in closed vehicles. There were no signs or writings around, but plenty of armed men. Moira pretended to be a supervisor, taking a maid to a new master. Soon, the women went down to the subway, where June was detained by the military, and Moira had to escape alone. In the present, June goes to the commander's office again, as he invited her to play another game. During the game, the woman tries to find out what happened to her predecessor. Fred admits that the girl voluntarily left her life because she found her life unbearable. June tells him that she also finds it very hard to be locked up. She feels she is breaking and fears her situation might end the same as her predecessors. After this conversation, they stop locking her up. June realizes she can manipulate Fred and is determined to take back her life. From that day on, June and Fred began to meet more often in the evenings. She openly flirts with him and even receives a forbidden women's magazine as a gift. One day, Serena asks June to help her in the garden and suddenly admits that she suspects her husband is infertile. She suggests June get pregnant by another man. It turns out she has already spoken with Nick, and he agrees to do it. June understands that if she does not become pregnant soon, she will be sent to the Red Center or the mines. She agrees. Later in the store, June suddenly meets her friend Offred, but she is so frightened that she is afraid to say anything. Later, Serena secretly leads June to Nick's room. Although the woman understands that her husband is no longer alive and she has been with other men repeatedly, it feels to her like she is cheating on him. It's 8:48 p.m. Everything happens in the presence of Serena, who very carefully takes her home afterward. During this time, Offred's new mistress confesses to her that she isn't feeling well and suggests skipping the ceremony. However, the maid reminds her that she cannot be ill every month. It turns out the mistress feels very sorry for the maid and often breaches the rules, but she cannot change anything. This evening, a ceremony is also supposed to take place at Fred's house. Unexpectedly, the commander begins to act out of protocol, looking into the woman's eyes and gently caressing her legs. In the evening, she goes to his office and demands that he no longer do that. As if Serena sees, she could be sent to the colonies. Fred promises to be more careful. They talk, reminiscing about their past lives. June reminds him that there was love then, which Fred does not understand. He laughs and tells her about the operation performed on Offred, and June asks permission to leave because he disgusts her. In the kitchen, Nick approaches her and unexpectedly confesses that he is an eye. That is, a person tasked with watching everyone and reporting everything to the community leaders. The next day at the market, June again sees Offred. The woman tells her that she is no longer part of the resistance because they broke her, but June can still fight. At that moment, Offred sees a car that has stopped nearby and, seizing the opportunity, gets into the car and tries to escape. The maids watch the chase with bated breath, but black cars with military personnel appear, and the woman is caught. June returns home, again reliving the events at the market, remembering her friend's words about the possibility of fighting. And at night, she herself goes to Nick's room. The next day, all the maids are brought to the wall where executions are carried out. The girls must clean it of blood because a delegation of foreigners is arriving in town who need not know all the horrors that occur in Gilead. Later, Serena calls June to her to warn her about giving thoughtful answers to the delegation members who will be dining at their house. The woman promises to think before she speaks. Then June is brought into the hall where she is met by a Mexican trade delegation led by the ambassador. The woman wants to learn everything about the handmaids, as they have heard much but do not know the truth. June is asked whether she performs her duties voluntarily and if she is treated well. June affirms that it is her choice. Finally, the ambassador asks if she is happy. June finds it very difficult to lie to people from the embassy. She really wants to tell the truth and ask for help, but Nick's gaze stops her. Later, the ambassador calls the commander's wives present at the dinner for a discussion. They praise Gilead, as all of them appreciate traditional values. However, the ambassador unexpectedly quotes from Serena's book about the power of women, which she wrote long before all these events. The woman is forced to acknowledge her mistakes, but everything is done by the will of God. Afterwards, Fred expresses his dissatisfaction with his wife's responses, as if they do not secure a deal with Mexico, Gilead's currency will depreciate. He does not want to hear his wife's excuses and leaves. Serena recalls the days before the coup when her husband was part of the conspirators who were hunted by the FBI. Back then, they loved each other, often went to cafes and talked a lot. It was then that she conceived her book about fertility as a national development idea, but she didn't finish because the coup started. The world needed changing, saving people, fulfilling God's will. Then the terror and shootings began. In the evening, Nick again conveys the commander's request for June to come to his office. They give in and kiss, although June is very afraid. Arriving at the commander's, she listens to his complaints about the Mexicans, who look at them as moral freaks. But it's their country that suffers from hunger and decay, unlike Gilead. Realizing her inattention, he dismisses June. But overcoming her disgust, she asks permission to stay to learn as much as possible about the delegation. Fred allows it and suddenly asks her for a kiss. June cannot refuse, though afterwards she feels the need to brush her teeth several times. The next day, a large festival is organized in honor of Gilead, to which all the community's handmaids and the gentlemen from the delegation are invited. Serena demands that the disfigured be hidden away, and Janine throws a tantrum. Lydia reminds her of her duty, and the girl agrees. The handmaids enter a huge ornate hall and sit at their assigned tables. Meanwhile, Serena ponders her speech and remembers how she was forbidden to speak at the first meeting of the new government, which believes that a woman's true purpose is to bear children. In the present, she welcomes the guests, reminding them of the pride in Gilead. She thanks the handmaids for their contributions and introduces a special surprise, the children of Gilead. The delegation is thrilled, but it is very hard for the handmaids to watch their children and not be able to approach them. At this moment, one of June's friends tells her the truth about why the delegation really came. It turns out the community intends to sell the handmaids. Watching a favorable turn in the negotiations, Serena remembers how she set up her new apartment. Fred was leaving for an important meeting, and she threw her book about women's place in modern society into the trash. In the present, June goes to Nick because he knew why the delegation had come. Why didn't he tell her the truth? She could have been fearless and revealed the truth herself. June is very agitated and reminds him that she is taken by force every month, yet she said she was happy. She tells him her real name. The next day, June coincidentally meets with members of the delegation who came to Serena's. Unable to keep silent, she tells them the whole truth about Gilead. Suddenly, the ambassador confesses that she cannot help her. In her city, not a single child has been born in the last 6 years, and her people are dying out. When the ambassador leaves, her escort suddenly confesses that he wants to help her because he knows her husband Luke, who is still alive. He asks her to write a note for him. The events return to the beginning when Luke urges his wife to flee while he stays behind to delay the pursuers. He fires his gun but is wounded and loses consciousness. Later, Luke regains consciousness in a medical vehicle. Unexpectedly, the vehicle loses control and crashes off the road. Wounded, Luke struggles to get out. He doesn't know where he is, and the medics accompanying him are dead. Luke finds his way to the road and follows it. Soon he finds his car, but there is no one around. Losing strength, he wanders through the forest and finds items belonging to his wife and daughter, realizing that they have been captured. Soon he reaches an abandoned town where he settles down to rest. He remembers how June lamented that they didn't leave the country immediately when it all started. They met a man who promised to get them out of the city, and he immediately threw out their documents, which could easily be used to track them. He advised them to throw away all their belongings, or it would be obvious they were fleeing. The family was forced to climb into the trunk. The guide drove them into the unknown. After some time, the car stopped, but the person checking the vehicle pretended that there was no one in the trunk. They continue on and soon reach a forest lodge where they must wait for a chance to cross the border. The guide leaves, promising to return soon. In the present, Luke is awakened by someone grabbing him. It turns out to be a resistance group that offers him help and takes him with them to Canada. In the car, they treat his wound. The man is eager to return and find his family, but the people call out their names and ask him to lie still. Suddenly, one of the girls feels unwell. Nurse Zoe tries to help her and shares that she served in the army when rumors reached them about the creation of special bases for women. When Washington fell, armed men began taking children and abducting women to these bases. Zoe managed to save only one girl from those held at the base. Luke recalls how he and June were walking by a forest lake when a hunter with a dog approached them. He seemed very friendly to the family, but Luke decided it was time to flee. They gathered their things and Luke taught June how to shoot, when the hunter suddenly returned, having caught a military broadcast on his radio and learned that they were being searched for. Their guide had been captured and executed, so they would have to trust him. The man named a place where his friend would meet them to help them cross the border, and the family left. In the present, Luke gets out of the van to go back and save his family. However, one of the women takes him to a local church and shows him women who were hanged for resisting the new law. It's better for Luke to leave and try to save his family in another way. Luke agrees to go to Canada. He and his new friends get on a boat that should take them across the border. Suddenly, soldiers appear on the dock and open fire. The boat speeds away into the night. 3 years later, Luke lives in Canada. One day, he receives an invitation to meet with the leader of the resistance, where he is handed a letter from a member of the Mexican delegation, in which June says she loves him and asks him to save their daughter. Meanwhile, June continues to secretly meet with Nick, justifying it with loneliness and the desire to feel love and support. Nick recalls his past life. He often changed jobs and was a regular at the employment service. Once, after being denied a job again, he got into a fight with another visitor. He was thrown out, but an employee of the service caught up with him, invited him for coffee, and told him about an organization that wanted to cleanse the country of human filth. The man invites Nick to a meeting and promises a good job. In the present, June returns to her room where she finds the commander. She is scared but doesn't show it. Unexpectedly, the man offers her some entertainment. First, he shaves her legs, since handmaids are not allowed to use razors themselves. Then he hands June some makeup. The last gift from Fred is a dress. For the first time in a long time, she takes off her handmaid's uniform and dresses in an evening outfit. Seeing the result, the commander is thrilled. She looks magnificent. He lets down her hair and informs her that they are going out tonight. Serena has gone to visit her mother, so Fred suggests using her code and pass, but he keeps their ultimate destination a secret until the last minute. Nick drives the couple to Boston. Along the way, the car is checked several times, but Fred asks June to crouch down, and no one notices the woman. During the drive, the commander recalls his conversation with the leader of the movement, who proposed gathering all fertile women and impregnating them. He even suggests that wives participate in the process. At that time, Nick was already his driver. At Fred's request, he expresses his positive opinion about the institution of handmaids, earning the commander's favor. Currently, June and Fred arrive at a venue, and upon entering, they find themselves in a real brothel where high-ranking officials relax. June is shocked, as they all constantly advocate for moral adherence and the preservation of traditional values. The women serving them are infertile, including lawyers, doctors, journalists, and bosses of various ranks. All of them are here by their own choice. Suddenly, June spots Moira among the women. She doesn't show any sign of recognizing her friend, but gestures towards the restroom. June excuses herself to powder her nose and heads there. Moira appears immediately. However, the women only manage to embrace when Moira's boss orders her to return to the hall. She asks June to find her later in the bedroom on the first floor. June cries from happiness that Moira is alive. Meanwhile, Nick exchanges scarce items for food with one of the handmaids in the kitchen. It becomes clear that this is his regular business. June returns to the hall, and Fred leads her to a reserved room, wanting to spend a real romantic evening with her. Nick, watching them leave, remembers how he removed the body of Fred's previous handmaid from a noose. Serena, looking at the corpse, then asked what else her husband expected. Now June walks arm in arm with the commander to the elevators. Later, barely holding back tears, she yields to the master's desire. Then, waiting for the man to fall asleep, she leaves the room, goes downstairs, and finds Moira in the common room for the girls at the establishment. Moira apologizes for leaving her back on the platform. She explains that she managed to reach Boston, but was caught and given two choices for her case's outcome: to be sent to the colonies or to a brothel. She chose the brothel. It's not so bad here. She advises forgetting about escape because there's no way out of Gilead. Then June tells her that Luke has escaped and asks her to hold on a little longer because she's sure they can escape. The action flashes back to when, based on Nick's tip, one of the commanders who seduced handmaids and stole from the budget was arrested. It becomes clear that he works for the government leader and reports everything about his master. The next morning, Fred meets the returning Serena, assuring her that he spent the evening alone. Nick becomes cold towards June unexpectedly. He refuses their next meeting because it can no longer continue like this. Their meetings are too dangerous. He fears June will be executed if they are caught, but she is willing to take the risk, hoping he will remember her forever. Then he confesses that his real name is Nick, and he is from Michigan. June returns to her room, but Serena unexpectedly calls out to her, bringing her an antique music box as a gift. June thanks her, and later draws parallels with herself. The perfect gift, a ballerina locked in a box who dances only when opened by its owners. Later, June, along with her friends, comes to the house of Janine's masters. The fact is, after the birth of the baby, her biological mother breastfed her, and now it's time to move to another house, to new masters. Janine cannot bring herself to give the child away, despite all the assurances from the adoptive parents to love and cherish the child. Finally, Janine comes outside where the other handmaids are waiting. Lydia accompanies the girl, preventing her from causing a scene. The woman is taken away. June approaches the girl who told her they would be sold to Mexico and agrees to help the resistance group. However, the girl pretends not to understand her. Janine is brought to a new home. She behaves very nervously as she is far from her child, and the greetings from her new masters do not comfort her. Meanwhile, the adoptive mother of her child goes for a walk accompanied by Serena, who genuinely rejoices that they finally managed to get rid of wild Janine. June is also walking down the street when she is stopped by Alma. She has connected with the resistance, and they task June with retrieving a package from one of the girls in the brothel, which must be done today. In the evening, she goes to the commander, and at first he dismisses her. But hearing about her desire to visit the brothel again, he decides she must be madly in love with him and agrees to recreate that night. At night, they head to the establishment, but this time, Fred immediately takes her to a room, preventing her from completing her task. Serena steps into the kitchen where Rita offers her a strong sedative and pours her alcohol. She invites the handmaid to join her and shares that her friend constantly complains about Janine's restless child, even though having one is such a blessing. At this time, Janine enters the bedroom of her new masters, where the commander's wife awaits her. The ceremony begins, although Janine is against it. She breaks free and tries to escape. Fred, wanting to please June, invites Moira to the room. He noticed they talked last time and thought June would want to speak with her. He goes to the shower, leaving the friends alone. June asks Moira to find the package she was supposed to bring, but her friend refuses, worried it could contain anything, even explosives. Moira seems resigned to her fate and does not want to risk her safety. June tries to persuade her, but Moira leaves. Fred orders them to get ready, and June fails to retrieve the package. At night, June sleeps restlessly. She dreams of her husband and daughter and feels happy, but then Serena wakes her up. It turns out Janine, unable to accept that her child was taken away, fled the new family. She stole her daughter and decided to end her life by jumping from a bridge. June is brought to her to save the child. She asks everyone to leave and goes to her friend. She persuades her to try and wait for better times when everything will return, and they can go to a bar and dance until dawn. But Janine does not believe it, though she is persuaded to save her daughter, hands the baby to June, and then jumps from the bridge. Rescuers immediately catch her. The unconscious Janine is taken to the hospital, and her former master, who, it turns out, really deceived her by promising to marry her, is arrested. Serena tries to help his wife, but she bitterly advises Serena to keep an eye on her own husband. Serena goes home and enters her husband's office. At the butcher's, the butcher offers June a steak and, along with the package, passes her the package from the brothel. From the note, she learns that Moira did it. Meanwhile, her friend kills another client and escapes from the establishment in his car. June recalls her first hours at the Red Center. Lydia immediately quashed any desire to resist by using a taser on her. Later, they implanted a chip in her ear, which would allow them to track her anywhere and everywhere. Now she finally steps onto the path of resistance because she realizes that by dressing the handmaids in uniforms, the authorities themselves turn them into an army. June returns home and hides the package behind the bathtub. But as she leaves the room, Serena strikes her hard on the head. She has learned about her and her husband's escapades, finding her dress. The woman forces the handmaid to take a pregnancy test, which turns out to be positive. June laughs at Serena's prayers. She never wanted a child in this house, but Serena leaves, not wanting to listen to her. Serena then goes to the commander, admits she knows everything, and commands him to keep his hands to himself. She then tells her husband about June's pregnancy, admitting the child is not his because he is weak. The Lord did not give him that capability. In the morning, Rita congratulates June on her pregnancy and starts taking care of her. June tells everything to Nick, and he is thrilled at the prospect of becoming a father. Later, Serena orders June to get dressed and tells her to get in the car. Moira crosses the border and reaches Canada. Serena drives June to a certain house, locking the handmaid inside. There, June sees Serena taking her daughter Hannah out. The woman talks to her, and the girl laughs, unaware that her mother is struggling in a car nearby. Serena leads the girl away and returns to the car. She orders the driver to leave and explains on the way that Hannah's safety entirely depends on her obedience. The handmaid must bear a healthy child, and then her daughter will not suffer. The trial over Janine's former master proceeds, and Fred speaks on his behalf. But it turns out his wife requested the harshest punishment for him. By the court sentence, the man has his hands cut off. That night, returning home, June goes to the commander's office and asks him to protect her daughter from Serena, for he does not truly know his wife. June lies that the child is his. The woman decides to unpack the package and finds hundreds of notes from handmaids across the country detailing their suffering and pleading for rescue from slavery. Moira receives documents, a phone, clothes, and some money for her initial expenses. In Gilead, the commander comes to Serena, who is arranging the nursery, and apologizes to her. They will have a child. June will leave and they will become a real family. Serena cries, not believing in the possibility of forgetting everything. June gathers the notes and heads outside, where her partner is already waiting for her. It turns out, by the same court's verdict, Janine has been sentenced to death, and all the handmaids have been brought to the event. The women are ordered to pick up a stone and stone the one who endangered the child's life. Janine is brought to the square. She behaves oddly, as if she does not realize the danger, smiling at all her friends. Lydia orders the execution to proceed. Suddenly, the most obedient of the handmaids refuses to do it. A guard strikes her hard in the face, and she falls. She is dragged away. Lydia demands the execution begin, but no one obeys. June is the first to step forward and drops her stone at Lydia's feet. The others do the same. The supervisor has no choice but to disperse the women to their homes. Janine survives, and the red-clad handmaids walk through the city with a sense of victory. Meanwhile, in Canada, Luke learns of Moira's arrival and comes to meet her because he listed her as a relative. The woman cries from happiness. At Fred's house, June awaits punishment, and a little later, armed men come for her. Nick manages to tell her not to resist and to go with them. As she leaves the house, she manages to whisper to Rita to check behind the bathtub. Serena tries to stop the soldiers, but they do not listen to her and take June away. The woman gets into a black car, not knowing whether this is the end or the beginning. This is where the first season ends.